Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome back to the Daily Grind. I'm your host, Chump Change. This is live and recorded. If you guys have any questions, please feel free. Throw it in the chat or in the comments after the fact. But we're going to watch more or less crypto news throughout YouTube. So we have Coffeezilla with a video, which was amazing. I thought it was awesome. He shits on Michael Lewis for being delusional. All right. And then we have Altcoin Daily is going to be he made a video about a billionaire's warning for crypto, Bitcoin, and the upcoming recession in general. And then we have some more FTX engineer testifies he alerted SBF of a bug that reveals Alameda's liabilities, which is kind of concerning. I didn't get to watch that fully, so we're gonna check that out and then we'll go from there. Let's see who's in the chat and then we will we'll get into this. Let's see. All set. I feel like you're All Set Miner. Was your name All Set Miner at one point? Because I feel like it wants to roll off my tongue like that every time I say All Set. Good to see you, buddy. Backwards Miner, Kyle Rosa, good to see you. Steven Cicero is a pirate. Chris Hanley, my man. Dumpster Fire. We have DJ Mines in the house. Good to see you, buddy. Leo Lustig. Let's see. Shay Mining, Andrew Masad, Sadie Sometimes, Sustainable Crypto, David. Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you, Kaiser, my man. Good to see you as well. Kaiser just published a book actually on Amazon, which is pretty neat. I will, you know what? I'll try to throw a link to that in the chat at some point, but he's going to be sending me one. So we're going to see. It's called What the Flux. I don't know anything about it, but we're gonna see how good it is. Slaw Squash, good to see you, buddy. Overboard Tech, Decoder Miner, what's up, man? Financial Failure, my man. I saw you short yesterday, actually. That was pretty good. All right, let's get into this, and we will, we'll go from there. Let's see what we're looking like. Kind of a mixed market today overall, to be honest. 27,720 Bitcoin. We have Ethereum 1634. LTC is at 65 bucks. You know what? I heard some drama yesterday with what was it? It was was it an exchange that removed Dogecoin, Litecoin, and XRP? Man, I forget what the exchange was. I heard it like late last night or yesterday afternoon, and I forget. I think Crypto Wendio was the one that actually made like a short video on it. Anyways, yeah, if you guys know what that is, let me know in the chat. XRP 52 cents. We have BNB 211, Solana 23 bucks. Let's check out Crypto Bubbles over here. This is on the week. Again, we have Trust Wallet token up 19.1%, Solana up 15.2, AVAX, which is Avalanche 15.5. We have Roll Bitcoin and Render. Damn, Render's pumping 173. Interesting. 13.2% on the week. All right, let's check out the day. So on the day, it's up 2.1. Avalanche is up 7.7 on the day. Ton is up 2.8. GMX 2.4. Casper. I've heard of this coin too. I think Serpent X Tech actually talked about this. I'm not too familiar with it, but interesting. Rune's down 8.6. Thorchain. XRD. Radax is down 5%. Overall, could be worse, right? All right, let's check out Fear and Greed Index, and then we'll jump into this. I don't want to blind you guys. Neutral, 50 over here on the Fear and Greed Index. Nothing's really changed. Top 10 coins by CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap over on CoinGecko. We have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tether, BNB, XRP, USD Coin. We have Lido Staked Ether, Solana, Cardano, and Dogecoin in 10th. Litecoin still in 15th. Shiba down in 18th. All right, let's start this off. We're going to save the best for last. We're going to wait until more people get here. So Coffeezilla is going to wait. But we're going to start with the FTX engineer testifies he alerted SBF of the bug that revealed Alameda's liabilities, which is kind of concerning. And guys, if you don't forget, hit that like button. I would really appreciate it. Let's get into this. Full links to these videos are in the description below.
Today, former FTX employees and insiders take the stand in Sam Bankman-Fried's trial. And Paul Tuchman, a former federal prosecutor, explains how SBF's public comments after the collapse of FTX could be used against him. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Tanea McKeel. Crypto markets mixed this morning, with Bitcoin ticking about 0.5% higher, Ether meanwhile losing a little less than 1%, and Cardano jumping 1.5%. All right, we're on to day 3 of Sam Bankman-Fried's trial, and we're getting right down to witness testimony. Longtime friend to SBF and FTX software engineer Adam Yedidia began his testimony yesterday and took the stand again today. Yedidia appeared under an immunity order because he said he was concerned he may have unwittingly written code that contributed to a crime. As part of his testimony, Yedidia remembered telling SBF about a bug in the code that revealed $8 billion in liabilities. Alameda.
Real quick, they said that he did this under immunity. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So they're definitely just trying to pin it on SBF. That's crazy.
In the code that revealed $8 billion in liabilities Alameda owed to FTX. He said when he asked if things were okay, Sam Bankman-Fried allegedly said, "We were bulletproof last year, we're not bulletproof this year."
Oh, wow.
SBF maintains that he was unaware of the mismanagement at the company and didn't intend to defraud anyone. Today, FTX co-founder Gary Wang is also expected to take the stand. He pleaded guilty to defrauding investors back in December. To talk more about the trial, Crypto World's Talia Kaplan sat down with former federal prosecutor Paul Tuchman yesterday to have him lay out the charges and procedures involved.
You have extensive experience prosecuting and defending fraud cases here in New York. You served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York for 11 years. And currently, your practice represents and advises clients as it pertains to criminal defense, regulatory compliance, and more. So given all your experience, I'm curious to get your take on the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried and all the media attention associated with it. In fact, during jury selection, the potential jurors said they have heard of Sam Bankman-Fried. The majority of them said they have heard of him, citing periodicals as the main source. One potential juror said he learned about Sam Bankman-Fried from a Joe Rogan podcast. So given all the media attention, the high-profile nature of this case, how can that play into the trial itself?
Well, certainly it's going to be a risk for the defense. The pretrial publicity in this case, certainly none of it was very favorable to the defendant. And lots of people through news coverage have likely heard about the volume of losses that were apparently suffered by FTX depositors, by related lenders and investors. And so it's certainly something that the defense tries very hard to overcome in the jury selection process, to try and do their best to get jurors who, at a minimum, have not made up their minds or haven't formed an opinion about the defendant, and even better, if possible, who are among those who haven't actually heard of the case.
So shortly before the arrest of Sam Bankman-Fried in December, actually, he spoke publicly about the collapse of FTX at the New York Times Deal Book Summit, where he said that he takes the blame and he's responsible for the, quote, huge management failures at the company. How is that going to impact his case, the fact that he spoke publicly?
Well, it certainly is likely that the prosecution is going to use those statements against him, that they're going to, assuming that there's a recording of it, they're going to play it for the jury at some point. And while that statement in itself is not necessarily the be-all and end-all of the case, it certainly creates additional hurdles for his defense team to overcome if they're going to get a not guilty verdict or even a hung jury.
So Sam Bankman-Fried pleaded not guilty to the 7 federal charges against him. Those charges include fraud and conspiracy. Can you talk about the charges? Why those specific charges? And what do prosecutors need to prove for him to get a conviction for those specific charges?
Well, essentially, the 7 charges that he's facing in this particular case, in this particular trial, fall into roughly 3 buckets. One bucket relates to fraud involving the misuse of FTX exchange depositors' funds. The allegations that he took those funds and he used them for improper purposes, namely for things like his own personal benefit or to prop up the Alameda hedge fund that he also essentially allegedly controlled. That's the first bucket. In a way, kind of the highest profile of the charges, because I think most people feel a particular affinity for potentially small depositors who put money into FTX and believe that they would get it out and may have lost all of the money they put in. The second bucket relates to an alleged fraud perpetrated against the lenders to Alameda. Alameda, as I said, is that hedge fund that he controlled, and investors lent money to Alameda, and the allegation is that the defendant did a number of things to mislead those lenders about the condition of Alameda at the time that they made loans or decided whether to call in loans that they had a right to do. The third bucket is more of a securities fraud, which relates to investors in FTX itself. FTX had investors, and there were securities in FTX, And the allegation is that the defendant made false statements about the condition of FTX to those investors, which caused them to incur losses. Those are really the three buckets of charges that he's facing here.
Now, one charge that's noticeably absent from this indictment filed in August against Sam Bankman-Fried was a campaign finance charge. And in this indictment, prosecutors allege that from 2019 until sometime in 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried misappropriated and embezzled FTX customer deposits and used the billions of dollars to fund speculative venture investments and to, quote, help fund over $100 million in campaign contributions to Democrats and Republicans to seek to influence cryptocurrency regulation, among other things. So those campaign
among $10 million to his parents for absolutely zero reason.
Contributions are in fact mentioned, but there's no charge. So how do you explain that?
Well, I believe that the reason that those charges are not part of this indictment relates to the decision to extradite Mr. Bankman-Fried from the Bahamas, where he was located when the charges were unsealed. And under the terms of the extradition, the agreement between the Department of Justice and the government of the Bahamas, there is apparently the Bahamas' position is that the extradition was not for the purpose of that particular charge. It was only for the purpose of the charges that he's facing in this trial. And under a legal doctrine called the rule of specialty, when you extradite someone from another country, as a general matter, you're only allowed to charge them and try them on the charges that are part of the extradition process, because those are the charges that the foreign country agreed to and understood would be charged and tried at the time of the extradition. But one thing that I think is very interesting about the campaign finance charges is that the judge in this case, the trial judge, Judge Kaplan, he's made a number of pretrial rulings in this case, almost all of which are favorable to the prosecution. And one of those rulings is that the government, it looks like, is going to be permitted to introduce evidence of those campaign finance allegations, even though those are not actually charged. Typically, in a criminal case, the prosecution is not permitted to introduce evidence of charged crimes that are not part of the charges that the defendant is facing in that particular trial. For example, just as an example, if someone's facing charges of credit card fraud, the prosecution can't also introduce evidence that they engaged in acts of domestic violence, because that would tend to have the jury think poorly of that defendant in a way that's not related to the charges they're actually deciding on. But in certain circumstances, you can, even if you're not charging a particular crime, the prosecution can get that evidence in. And one way would be if, for example, if you use the example of the domestic violence and credit card fraud, if the defendant who's charged with credit card fraud, if there's an allegation that the reason they committed that credit card fraud was to get money in order to pay off their victim of domestic violence so they wouldn't go to the police, then that would be the motive for the charged crime. And if the motive for the charged crime relates to another crime, then it can be introduced. In this case, the government's arguing that one of the motives, essentially, for SBF committing the fraud crimes was to get money that he could then use to make these campaign donations. And so the motive, allegedly, for the charged crimes is the campaign finance allegations. And so,
what do you guys think in the chat? Do you think his parents are going to get bagged too, right after this, after he gets either guilty or whatever? Do you think they're going to have a separate trial for them?
So on that basis, it looks like the judge is going to let the government introduce evidence relating to the campaign finance activity as well.
There's no chance that his parents didn't kind of coach him into, donating to all these political parties. Like, donate to the higher ups because they're going to help you in the long run type deal. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but to me, like, he's a bookworm. He's a nerd. Like, there's no chance that he just came off the top of his own head and was like, hey, I need to donate money to all these people. But with that being said, I want to get into this Coffeezilla thing because I got to watch this briefly last night, not too far in depth. I wanted to save it a little bit for this morning. So guys, I want to show you right here. There's a little like button. If you guys could hit that, I would appreciate it. Full videos down in the description below. We're going to watch it here today. Again, this was edited amazingly, by the way. So let's get into it. Shout out to Coffeezilla.
Michael Lewis, your famous finance author, can you explain how the FTX Ponzi scheme happened?
This isn't a Ponzi scheme. Like, when you think of a Ponzi scheme, I don't know, Bernie Madoff. The problem is there's no real business there. The dollar coming in is being used to pay the dollar going out. And in this case, they actually had a great real business. If no one had ever cast aspersions on the business, if there hadn't been a run on customer deposits, they'd still be sitting there making tons of money.
What the f are you talking about? Ladies and
I love how he's like, what the F are you talking about? Leo Lustig, thank you so much for the 5 gifted membership. Appreciate you. Make sure you guys link your YouTube with Discord and you'll get access to that VIP chat over there. And we're doing the hash rate giveaway. I actually need to pull 2 names today from 2 separate videos for the VIPs. So, all right, let's continue.
gentlemen, today is the first day of Sam Bankman-Fried's criminal trial, and already we have books, media tours going on about it, most notably from the finance writer Michael Lewis, who wrote The Big Short, Moneyball, and now Going Infinite, which he says is a letter to the jury about the true story of what happened with FTX.
You had so much access to Sam Bankman-Fried writing this book. What ultimately is the purpose here?
I realized I had an ambition for the book. I saw it as a kind of letter to the jury. I mean, there's going to be this trial, and the lawyers are going to tell 2 stories. And so there's a story war going on in the courtroom, and I think neither one of those stories is as good as the story I have.
Now, I decided to read that story so you don't have to, because historically, these letters to the jury haven't gone all that great, and turns out this one is no different. I had to sit through hundreds of pages of Sam worship, a sycophantic 60 Minutes interview talking about what a great business FTX was, and I was only left with one question. What is it about Sam Bankman-Fried that makes smart people go nuts? Well, I decided to investigate. I wondered, is it the Bahamas sea salt air? Is it effective altruism? Or is it a $40 million penthouse? I think I've got a guess. Which is why I'm here, in the $40 million Bahama penthouse. Now, I know many of you have questions. How did you afford this? The truth is, I lowballed him with FTT tokens, and the seller was very motivated. So this will be my new base of operations for finding the truth about SBF. And we're going to start by looking at one of the last supporters of Sam, Michael Lewis. And yes, the coconut came with the penthouse. To understand this interview, frankly, the whole book, you need to know that Michael Lewis started it as like a positive story about Sam before FTX collapsed, right? It was supposed to be a crypto, like rags to riches story about how dreams really do come true. But of course, then they committed fraud and collapsed. And so everyone kind of naturally thought, oh yeah, he'll just change the book. Actually, kind of an interesting twist. Except the book didn't change. 75% of the book just doesn't mention anything about fraud. When Michael Lewis does get to the collapse, he just believes Sam Bankman-Fried about everything unquestioningly. Like it's so bad that Sam Bankman-Fried wouldn't even trust himself that much. Literally, Sam is quoted in Michael's book saying, and I do think this is a red flag, quote, "In a lot of ways, I don't really have a soul. In the end, there's a pretty decent argument that my empathy is fake, my feelings are fake, and my facial reactions are fake." Now compare and contrast that to Michael Lewis, describing Sam as, "The things he was telling me, all of which, I should say here, turned out to be true, was incredible." So even SBF believes in SBF less than Michael Lewis does. This man is a one-man cheerleader team. You've literally got the subject of your book saying, "I have no soul and my reactions are fake." And then the writer just goes, "This may be the most honest man I've ever met." Believing this requires so much willful ignorance on the part of Michael Lewis that it borderlines on malpractice. Take, for instance, Dan Friedberg, SBF's lawyer, who we explained has a history of covering up fraud before FTX. Does Michael Lewis mention this at all? No. Let me share with you some of the ways Dan Friedberg is talked about. Here's some quotes. In Sam's world, Dan Friedberg, in his early 50s, has been the only important grown-up. He was FTX's general counsel. He was also the babysitter. He'd sort of gotten swept up by the enthusiasm of the effective altruists. "I wanted to be a Sam," as he put it. And by the way, being a Sam was a huge compliment to Michael.
A lot of people wanted there to be a Sam. You know, there is still a Sam Bankman-Fried shaped hole in the world that now needs filling. Like that character would be very useful.
What he represented.
What he wanted to do with the resources.
The irony here is, again, you know who is more skeptical of Dan Friedberg than Michael Lewis? Sam Bankman-Fried. How do I know this? Well, I got an audio recording from Tiffany Fong, a reporter we've talked to before who's been talking to Sam.
Hey, Coffee. So while talking to Sam in April, I discovered he was aware of Dan Friedberg's past, although he stops short of explicitly accusing him of committing crimes.
Well, everyone thought that Dan Friedberg was very clearly sketchy, so it was very shocking that he was hired at FTX.
So he's an interesting guy.
Because what was he involved with? Ultimate Bets or something like that?
Yeah, it's something like that. It wasn't quite Ultimate Bets, but it's something like that.
Yeah. And he was like, his reputation was like that he was really shady or something like that.
Yeah, he'd have a somewhat shady reputation. He's a very good lawyer. He's extremely productive. He had extremely good instincts, and he would take care of problems that like other lawyers would not think to take care of or not know how to take care of.
That's
so
pretty sketchy.
Even Sam Bankman-Fried doesn't try to deny Dan's shady reputation and said Dan would take care of things other lawyers wouldn't. Like, even the guy on trial is like, all right, I have to admit, he's pretty sketchy. So it's insane to
That's so fucked up. That is so messed up.
watch Michael Lewis put zero skepticism into the characters of FTX's collapse. But then, watch this. Contrast that with how much skepticism Michael Lewis brings to the bankruptcy lawyer, John Ray, like the guy who's taken over the collapse now that FTX is bankrupt. Quote, John Ray expected to see evidence of a crime. Instead of answering the question, Ray launched a blitzkrieg of lawsuits against various people to whom Sam had handed money. The pleasure Ray took in whatever he unearthed was so infectious that I often didn't have the heart to say, I'm not quite sure that you found exactly what you think you found. So every step of the way, he's just like, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But Sam Bankman-Fried, it's so unbelievably condescending the way this book interrogates everyone who had to clean up the FTX mess instead of the, people responsible. But worse, Michael Lewis casts himself as like the only truth teller. We've all been in the dark, but thanks to this man's mighty powers of the pen, he's gonna reveal the truth that nobody knew.
The story of Sam's life is people not understanding him, misreading him. He's so different, he's so unusual. I mean, I think in a funny way that the reason I have such a compelling story is I have a character that I do come to know and that the reader comes to know that the world still doesn't know.
Hey guys, you're being really mean to Sam. Don't you know he's really misunderstood? Did I mention what a good guy he is yet? He really cares about pandemics and saving democracy.
So Sam Bankman-Fried ends up with a portfolio heavily concentrated in two things. Pandemic prevention, because there really are things the government should be doing. He took the view that all the big existential problems are going to require the United States government to be involved to solve them. And if the democracy is undermined, like we don't have our democracy anymore, all these problems are less likely to be solved.
I have no idea why we're talking about Sam like he's on trial for the Nobel Peace Prize instead of fraud. The part that annoys me the most is Michael Lewis doesn't admit the fact that for all the talk about giving, the effective altruism really didn't happen. You know what did happen? Paying celebrities stupid sums of money so he could hang out with them.
He paid Tom Brady $55 million for 20 hours a year for 3 years. He paid Steph Curry $35 million for same thing for 3 years.
Pretty good hourly wage.
He spent $100 and something million buying the naming rights for the Miami Heat arena.
I don't think so.
He spent $25 million making a Super Bowl ad with Larry David.
It's FTX? Yeah, I don't think so.
For
$25 million?
which he then paid Larry David another $10 million.
And they gave him another 10, $35 million for one commercial? What? I'm in the wrong business.
Breathtaking what's on that list.
I don't know what's so breathtaking about that. How does this qualify as like, this guy's such an altruist? You paid a guy $50 million for 20 hours of work. And let's not forget, by the way, part of that money came from customers' deposits. So just understand, as we go into this court case, you're gonna hear some people try to say that Sam is an innocent, well-meaning altruist who bumbled his way into losing $8 billion. Of course, we all know that isn't true. And the people who are suggesting it, it seems are allergic to basic research and do not extend the same levels of sympathy that they extend to Sam to the actual victims, who they think are just gamblers anyways.
I could see people watching this saying like, come on guys, this is Elizabeth Holmes in cargo shorts.
Right.
And this is all a ruse, don't fall for the shtick, this is a bad actor.
It is a little different supplying phony medical information to people that might kill them. And in this case, what you're doing is possibly losing some money that belonged to crypto speculators in the Bahamas. On the other hand,
is he trying to like dumb this down that he didn't steal all this money?
This is not to excuse. He shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you kind of are excusing it. It was just a few speculators in the Bahamas who lost money. No, it wasn't. Regular people are owed money. That's kind of the whole point of this thing. Partially because of all of those influencers who were hired, whether it be on YouTube, sports influencers. They weren't just appealing to the Bahamas. Those Super Bowl ads didn't play in the Bahamas. Played in the United States, baby. This whole interview got me, as you can tell, a little bit steamed, which then made me read the book because I was like, probably the book's better. But that actually made me more angry. And it literally put me back to work on this case. I'd been working on a different project thinking, the SBF stuff is kind of open shut. The normal finance writers can handle it. But I was wrong. So I'm back. I'll be watching this case like a hawk. And, we'll be covering it for the $40 million Bahama penthouse. But I may even fly up to New York just to make sure there's no funny business. Make sure Michael Lewis isn't in the courtroom petitioning the jury for a lighter sentence on his baby Sam. Anyways, that's it for me. Case closed, 1 star.
That was such a good video. Shout out to Coffeezilla. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. What do you guys think? Dude, this guy is delusional. This Michael Lewis guy is delusional. To sit there and like praise the fact that it wasn't that like he was like some superhero that's like trying to help the whole world. I don't understand the logic there. I don't understand it. Anyways, all right, let's get into this one last video I got. It's 8 minutes long, and then I got to scram because we got some things to do. All right, let's do it. You guys have any questions at me in the chat? That was great.
Well, if that's true, then equities are wildly overvalued.
That's true.
That's true.
It is true.
Okay.
You would think Bitcoin would be...
But then I would think that crypto would be wildly overvalued too.
Yeah.
So, billionaire investor Dan Morehead, CEO of Pantera Capital, an American hedge fund that specializes in cryptocurrencies, currently with $4.2 billion in assets under management, gave such interesting perspective on where the crypto market and the stock market are headed in 2024.
Let's talk crypto in just a second, but let's talk about bonds because it very well may be that the bond market will have an impact, I imagine, on crypto. But where do you really think we're headed, and what does this next 12 months look like to you, given what we've even seen in the last week?
Yeah, I think we have a failure of imagination that all working age people have never traded in a rising rate environment. I came to Wall Street in the 80s, and it was already 6 years into a 40-year bull market, and everything gets bailed out by the Fed lowering rates for the last 40 years. We're in a different regime.
Because with core inflation still so high and a whole generation of younger investors today that haven't lived through a high interest rate increasing environment, for the last 40 years, interest rates have primarily been trending down.
All working age people have never traded in a rising rate environment. I came to Wall Street in the 80s, and it was already 6 years into a 40-year bull market, and everything gets bailed out by the Fed lowering rates for the last 40 years. We're in a different regime. And the rates, 2 years ago, I predicted when Fed funds were 0 and the 10-year was 1.3, they'd both go to 5 at least. We're here. I think they're going higher. The normal real rate for the Fed is...
Why is he zooming in so close on his goddamn mouth? Like, why is he doing that?
Is 1% over inflation. We're not even there yet.
Right.
Wage inflation is double the Fed's target. We have record labor strikes going on right now. So the Fed has to keep doing more. And the 10-year note is right now we're flat to Fed funds. It's typically a premium. It's typically at 2% above inflation.
Today.
And again, this is all projecting that both the inflation rate and the core inflation rate in the US is going to be stickier for longer, meaning for the Fed, rates are going to stay higher for longer.
Earlier today, we had a guy on from Bob Michael said that inflation's, what are you saying inflation is now? What number are you using?
Well, so core inflation is 4.4, which is more than double the stable prices that the Fed uses.
He said inflation's already at a point where rates are too high. That's what he was saying.
Oh, inflation, they're supposed to keep it under 2%, and it's at 4.4, and wage inflation is 4.5 and increasing.
Right. The question is, when you have, like a Barry Sterling will tell you that, like, what he would call real inflation, he would think is, when you really calculate the full thing, he would say we're already there.
Yeah.
And the question is whether you think the Fed either thinks we're already there or you even think that's real?
Already at 2%?
Yeah.
Because so the funny thing is there's an owner's equivalent rent thing in inflation, and it takes 2 years to fully play through. And even if houses stayed stable for the next 2 years, it'll still go up 1.1%, according to the Atlanta Fed. So there's still a lot more inflation from 2 years ago that's piped in. And the Case-Shiller Home Index is still at record highs.
So if you're right, we're talking about increased rates, nobody lowering rates in the next 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe for several years, right? Like, I think that's what people are having a hard time thinking about, is rates could stay up for 5 or 4 years.
If that's true, then equities are wildly overvalued.
That's true.
Dan Morehead is projecting that the Federal Reserve will have to keep rates, again, higher for longer, possibly for several years.
Yeah, and maybe for several years, right? Like, I think that's what people are having a hard time thinking about.
And he's not saying that a recession would last that long, but he is saying this is a different paradigm in markets, in the economy, compared to the last 40 years.
Well, if that's true, then equities are wildly overvalued.
That's true.
That's true.
It is true.
Okay.
You would think Bitcoin would.
But then I would think that crypto would be wildly overvalued too.
Yeah.
So equities probably are overvalued because the PE is the same level it was when rates were crashing, but now rates are much higher. And if you took the normal equity risk premium for equities onto a 5% 10-year note, they should be 23% lower than today.
Wait, equities should be 23% lower today?
And
You're
if
talking
you
about the
took
S&P?
The S&P, yeah. And if you took it compared to its 50-year average of equity risk premium, it'd be 43% lower. And I'm not saying 43 is going to happen, but we got to keep in mind there have been 2 13-year periods that equities didn't go up in the 2000s and in the 70s, 80s. We could see that.
You think 23% is going to happen, if not 43?
I think equities are going to go down for the next few years.
And then, of course, what does that mean for Bitcoin, for crypto?
And that's why crypto is relevant, because it's not tied to interest rates, and that's pretty rare, right?
It kind of is
tied to risk.
You need the Fed opening the spigots for Bitcoin to go up.
Well, the Fed opening the spigots in 2020 was unambiguously wonderful for anything that had a fixed quantity.
It hasn't been an inflation hedge.
Yeah, so the thought is it was highly correlated last year. And
to what?
So Bitcoin is a proxy for
risk on.
NASDAQ is what it's
risk on.
Yeah,
right.
So it was a very risk-on asset until the middle of last year, but I think that was correlated with or connected to a lot of super highly levered things like BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, and those are once-in-a-generation weird occurrence. They're in the past, and this year the correlation of Bitcoin to the S&P 500 is only 0.2. Historically, it's 0.1.
So what is it correlated to then?
So it's like some people call it digital gold because it's kind of its own thing. It's not interest rate related. Obviously, bonds are interest rate related mathematically, equities.
So is Dan Morehead crazy, or is he the smartest guy in the room?
Real estate.
I think people are waiting for a cut. And every time they think there might be a cut and the Fed starts easing again, that's when Bitcoin goes, because its fiat becomes less valuable.
I agree. It is definitely cyclically connected to things like that.
Okay.
But my overall view is we're in a 20-year secular bull market in blockchain, right? It's a very transformative technology. It's going to change so many different things. And so, yeah, it does squiggle a little bit with what the Fed does.
My take on all this is it's incredibly risky to hold Bitcoin. It's even riskier to hold crypto, but it's riskiest not to hold any at all.
I think that equities could come down 23%, or maybe should, just based on historic valuations. Where do you think Bitcoin should be valued?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We talk to asset allocators all the time. If you're thinking put money to work in bonds, I think that's pretty dangerous. Put money to work in real estate. Real estate is probably coming off all-time highs. Equities, I think, are overvalued. That does leave a couple of asset classes like real commodities and blockchain. Blockchain is a $1 trillion asset class. So most institutions have essentially zero exposure right now. They should, dial it up to a couple percent.
Which gets Bitcoin itself to what level? I mean, if it's 27.7 now.
Well, Bitcoin has a 14-year trend growth of 145% a year. That's kind of my general forecast. It'll just reassert that, and every year it'll more than double.
More than double.
Every year it'll more than double.
It's been doing it for 14 years on average, obviously. So
nothing else to close.
Holy shit.
If it's digital gold, when does it become like gold and hit a...
It never...
Did you hear that? He just said it'll double every year, roughly, and it's been doing it every 14 years on average. That's crazy.
go up again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. It's like 20 years when everybody has it. Right now, most institutions really have essentially a, zero exposure.
Be sure to click subscribe for daily.
Crazy. Shout out to Altcoin Daily for that video. I didn't get a chance to watch that yet, to be honest, over on Squawk Box. So shout out to CNBC for that clip that he took from there. All right, Mr. Endless Mining, good to see you. By the way, Endless Mining has they have the, what is it, the S21s that are going to be, they're on pre-sale right now, and I do have my own affiliate code I'm going to be putting in the descriptions below at some point. I haven't done it yet, but I will be doing it. So if you guys are interested, go check out endlessmining.com and you guys can get on your S21s. They're pretty crazy. 200 terahash at 3500 watts, I think. Pretty impressive. I kind of want one, not gonna lie. But all right, guys, that's going to do it for today. Unfortunately, I got to scram. Hopefully you guys have a great and happy Friday. It's payday for most of you, so make sure you guys invest at least a little bit into Bitcoin. Not financial advice, but that's my personal, that's personally what I would do if I was getting a paycheck every Friday. Just a little bit, maybe 20 bucks, something like that, just dollar cost average into something that can benefit you long term, because that was a pretty interesting take on it when he said it doubles every 14, or it has been for the last 14 years, been doubling every year on average. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah, guys, hit that like button on the way out, and I'll catch you guys soon tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace out.